this is not new to you, so another day at the office. But my fam, thank you, appreciate you.
Always.
Let me paint a picture for you, right? 1997.
All right.
There's a Kinko's on 88th Street, Kendall Drive, somewhere between Town and Country and where Womeco, remember Womeco Theater? Yeah. Where Womeco used to be. And it's about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I'm a junior in high school, going to Killian. And I don't know how I ended up at the Kinko's, but in that conference room or that office space inside Kinko's was you and a guy named Lucky. And y'all were working on a magazine, a hip hop magazine.
Trife Life.
Trife Life. Yeah. And I don't know how I came to meet you or Lucky, but within that, me coming there that night, I was asked by you guys to write an album review for Gangstar, Moment of Truth.
Wow, that's crazy.
And that's how I met you. Yeah, that's how we met. I don't know how I ended up there that night. I don't know the degrees of separation between me and you and me and Lucky. And like, when the last time you spoke to him?
Not too long ago, maybe a year ago.
Oh yeah,
something like that. Yeah, or maybe like through text or social media or something. Yeah. He had been down here. Yeah, he wanted to, I think, stop by Drink Champs, or he might have. I forget, but yeah, it wasn't too long ago that I spoke to him. Yeah.
See, I probably hadn't seen him since that night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
I wish we launched that magazine. I felt like we had something there. We had it laid out, and just unfortunately, when we were ready to push it through, it just didn't happen.
But even back then, like that was pretty ahead of y'all time for being as young as you guys were back then. You know, that's 20-something years ago, and wanting to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to use the example that the age that we were doing things and started doing things is why I feel like I can relate to young folks today and whatever they're talking about. Like if they look at me and they see a white bearded dude, I'd be like, nah, I was you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like everything.
I still am you.
Yeah, no, I'm still doing. And what I want to do is try to give you the roadmap to be me if you really want to do it as long as I've been doing it. Exactly. You know?
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a disconnect in this generation, it seems like, to the forefathers that came before? Like, because at least for me, you know, when I was coming up, I grew up in the 80s, 90s. I had a respect for everything that came before me culturally.
Same here.
And it just seems like the youth nowadays, that just doesn't exist. Like, I don't know what.
I have my own opinions, and I have to say opinion because I think people have different, opinions on it or outlooks on why they think this happened. I blame my generation for dropping the ball. I think that we're the generation that made a lot of money in the music industry. And we got to remember, rap is the music of hip hop, the culture. Right. So rap went off and made a ton of money. And so what happens is the artists that started making all kinds of money was like, oh, damn, like, I never, like, this is crazy. They kind of said, well, this might last forever, whatever. Like, I just feel like we got caught up. And I say we, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel that I was doing this, but I have to own up that it's my generation and say I feel like we got caught up in all of that, money and just the club life and all this stuff. And we thought we gonna be that age forever. And we kind of like dropped the ball in realizing that you got to keep, passing down this information. And we just stopped.
Do you think there's a way? Do you think there's a way to get it back, like to get that lineage and that knowledge passing back? Like, can the youth now somehow, the young hip hop people that are in their 20s realize that disconnect happened and then say, okay, well, we're gonna pick up the baton from where the previous generation left off at, so that the ones who come after us have some type of preservation, for the culture?
I think it could happen. I mean, I think it's just different times because of the way that that music is released and the way that the internet, just throws out things to the masses. It's just you're getting bombarded with all these different people. And so it's hard for one person or one group of people to like lead the way and kind of inspire the youth. But you have leaders like a Kendrick, that he's paying homage all the time, and a J. Cole or different people, and even like us and Drink Champs, that we've kind of made it kind of cool for young cats to like, oh, look at all these old guys wilding out, but then they're watching us and laughing, and they're seeing drunk people, but then they're learning some tidbits, and they might be like, oh damn, that's kind of ill, that's dope that they were doing that, or this is how that happened. and all we could do is just each of us just do our part and try to keep promoting, handing down the knowledge and kind of just saying what we feel is what should be passed on.
I think that's why you have people like Ninth Wonder, that'll teach a hip hop class, at a prestigious collegiate, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Going back to Trife Life, it's for me being, I guess I was like 16, 17 at the time, and my brother Selwyn was already editor-in-chief at the Source magazine. So you guys asking me to, write a music review, I was totally like trying to, embody him in that whole thing. And that kind of...
And Simeon, man.
That kind of helped push my, I guess, pursuit of my contribution to the culture. Like it kind of kickstarted it, because I, maybe been rapping for like, I don't know, maybe a year up to, at that point. Yeah. But in the process of like listening to the Gang Starr album and trying to dissect it to be able to write about it, I was like, getting into Inspector Deck's rhymes and Crumb Snatcher. And I'm like, damn, like, wait, but I want to rap like this too. I want to be able to do this. And then that kind of veered off from going the journalist route to the artist route. But I always kind of attribute that back to you guys and linking with
Dope.
you.
That I don't know if you know that, but that was because before we started filming, we were talking about the different offices, spaces I had. That was actually our first like meeting area.
The Kinkos?
The first was like my crib where I had all my DJ equipment, but then the Kinkos was because I was always trying to be semi-professional in what we were doing, and we would go to Kinkos. I would make my mixtape covers there. And I would tell everybody, let's all meet up. This is where we're gonna have our meeting while I'm, pressing up the mixtape covers.
And you talking about cassettes?
Yeah, cassettes at that time. Yeah, and I was even designing them myself in the Kinko's computers a lot of times. And the manager was like, "Yo, y'all are scaring," because it looked like a gang meeting. Yeah. Y'all are scaring, the customers. But the manager was hella cool. He's like, "I'm gonna give you the conference room. If you come consistently this day at this time, the conference room is yours." Because, he knew we were just trying to like just make things happen. So and we were there for like a year probably using that conference room, which it costs a lot of money to rent that room. At least for some kids, it costs a lot of money.
Right.
And that was like our first like official like meeting space.
Right. Yeah. That's dope. And that summer, I ended up going to an entrepreneurship academy at FIU. Mm-hmm. And the premise of it was to take 150 minority students and teach us how to write business plans, right? And in that 6, 7, 8 week process, they would grant money to the top 3 business plans to start a business. And I remember my business plan came in second behind like a babysitting service. And I said, okay, well, they're gonna give me $3,500. What do I wanna do? And I'm like, well, what am I into? I'm into hip hop and I'm into clothes. And at this point, this is me coming from borrowing my brother's clothes, Sim and Selwyn, and wearing their shit and wearing sneakers that don't fit, and but just trying to, have the cool shit when I went to, school the next day. Yeah. But within that, I'm like, I want to try to start a t-shirt line. And that's when I got with my partner Andre, and we came up with Q Gear. And then I said, okay, so now how am I gonna get these shirts out? And that's when I went back to you. I knew you had the Crazy Goods store. And you gave me like a consignment deal to put the shirts in the store. And you didn't even have to do that, man. So that was real love.
I mean, that goes back to how I feel that that's what we need to do. If, as like a little bit of an older generation, I was a different generation than you. If I'm doing this is the way that I continue like a legacy and help, prop up our community and our scene and stuff like that. That's the only way that I know that you should do it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the way it should be done.
I mean, just for me to, to walk into Crazy Goods and look at something that my partner and I conceptualize in our mind, and then to see it hanging, like I can even see walking to the store and you had like, there were shirts to the right and it would be like hanging up on the top row, and it was just like, at 16, 17 years old, that even felt like it was monumental, like for us. But you've always kind of been like the same dude since back then, just as far as like the love you show and just how genuine of a person you are.
I try, man.
Nah, and I think that's carried over into everything you got going on today.
Thanks.
But like, what made you even want to open like a store? Like, what was the thought process?
It was just whatever we could do to contribute to the local scene. That when we started Crazy Hood in 1993, there was no real local hip hop scene. The bass scene was thriving, but hip hop, like just straight up boom bap hip hop, wasn't really thriving out here, and it was like parallel to bass at the time. Like there's a complicated history with bass music and hip hop. At one time, bass was, you know, and regular rap, it was all the same thing. You know, like Luke was bringing down Run DMC and all these guys. They were all one thing, but at some point, they kind of started to feel that hip hop was this New York intrusion, and so like it made a split, and it was these parallel universes, and so the bass scene was thriving, and they had national distribution. They were doing their thing. Two Life Crew was killing it, and we loved all of that stuff too. But we were into hip hop, like just hardcore boom bap hip hop, and we wanted that from Miami, and there wasn't a lot of outlets for it. So my whole thing with Crazy Hood was like, what can we do to contribute to the scene and help build it up and prop it up and inspire the type of hip hop that we want to see come out of Miami. I wanted to see lyrical cats come out of Miami, talking about Miami, not repping somewhere else, but repping Miami and talking about the things that we could relate to. And that was just a part of the evolution. Like, we didn't have stores. Like, there was a couple hip hop stores, but they were like head shops also. You know, like, and I wasn't never really into smoking, so I was like, man, like, I don't know, that's not a good look. Like, you know, if a parent wants to bring their kid in and buy some stuff, they don't need to be seeing bongs and all that stuff right here. Like, it doesn't have to go hand in hand. To me, that's not a part of the culture. Right. You know, you smoke weed, that's cool, but that had nothing to do with the culture. So me and my boy Eddie, we didn't have much resources. We just did whatever we did and scrambled whatever we had to scramble together, and we opened up Crazy Goods, and we just wanted to have a nice little hip hop shop that sold records, sold graffiti stuff, and we try to help out anybody local, which mixtape DJs, local clothing brands, whatever we could. We try to do it.
Because you originally you were born in LA, right?
Yeah, I'm originally from LA.
And then coming out here, how did you not get swayed by the bass scene because it was so dominant at that time? Like, what made you stick to like the boom bap essence of hip hop?
I mean, it's not that I didn't get swayed. I always try to tell people, like, it's bass and everything else. It's a part. If you're from Miami, it's a part of our DNA. Like, you know, I always say the best parties I went to in high school, they had a bass set, you know, because you're dancing with the chicks. You had a reggae set, dancehall set, you're dancing with the chicks, and then you had this boom bap set, you know, and you just listen to some good music and dancing. So it's a part of us, but it was just, I don't know. I mean, I didn't make the division that was created, so I would have probably never done it. But what happened is that bass, if you look back at Two Life Crew and you look at like the music around that era, like the Run DMCs or whoever, they're not really rapping too much, like too differently. You know, it's just maybe different styles of the production or the subject matter. Right. You know, but more or less the landscape of how they're rapping is almost the same. You know, so the evolution of bass is where they left lyrics and they left rapping, and it was more about just bass music, you know, the 808 just dance music, you know, and it was the speed of the records and all that stuff. Where hip hop was going in the direction of, we want to be more lyrical, we're slowing down the records, you know, and we just want to concentrate on these bars. Right. And I gravitated towards that, still loving bass music, but I was more like, I wanted to absorb these lyrics, you know, and these beats and these different samples that were being used in the production of hip hop. And that's where I was like, yeah, you know, and to me it was all hip hop, but there was a division that was created for whatever reason. So NWA and Public Enemy were like really the groups that solidified me being like, this is like where I want to be at. Like musically, I don't know what I'm going to do, but like that's what it spoke to me when those two groups came out. Like I was already listening to it before that, but those two groups is what like spoke to me, and that's what I wanted to pursue.
You, Crazy Hood, for me, I guess at the time, you know, being Simeon's younger brother, you know, there were like his clique and his crew of MCs and artists, and then there was like what you had going on with Crazy Hood. Did the two ever mesh? Because his was the Blunt Crew, if I remember the name correctly. So it was like Last Straws, which is him, Grand Funk and D-Rhythm. Grand Funk later became Stats, and then did Night Breeders with 210 Jack and Epps, D-Rhythm, and then it was like Q45, and then Lionel Qualo, B-Dope, you know, all these guys. And so it was like that conglomerate, and then it was like you guys, but you guys never meshed or like crossed paths?
Yeah, we definitely did. And they were actually, like Last Straws and all that, they were doing it a little bit before us. And back then, if you did it a year or even a couple months before some people, that felt like an eternity. And we looked up to those guys, you know, definitely the Last Straws and all that. Like I was just like in awe of that, you know, coming out of Kendall. And we would go to this spot called the Zoo. It was like one of the first hip hop clubs in Miami. My boy Trek, who did the mural that's out here, him and Brimstone, those guys, they put together that, and that's where I would see all these guys. I would see B Dope, and I saw Craze's first like DJ set, you know, and all this stuff. And yeah, we definitely crossed paths, but I was already a fan of their movement because they were doing exactly what I wanted to do, you know, and they were already doing it.
Right.
So they were probably maybe, I mean, it felt like they were years ahead of us, but they were maybe a year ahead of us. And then as we got our stuff going, then we definitely started crossing paths and working with each other.
Yeah, because my brother was, it just had to be like 92, 93, because he was still in high school. He was still at Killian.
Yeah.
And the Last Straws and them, they signed a record deal to this company, Black Jacobins, I think was the name of the company. And they were recording out of Ica's studio right around here, you know. Yeah. I don't even know if that shit still exists anymore. Probably not, right? But at that time, it was like, the night I met B Dope was he was in Simeon's room on the floor writing rhymes. Right. You know, and that's how I met him. Like, I'm 11 years old, walking in the house, trying to sneak in the room and see what my brother's doing. He's like, get the fuck out of here, moving. But as I peek in the door, it's him and Bob, you know, writing rhymes. Right. And then, you know, you fast forward 20 something years, I just did a show with B Dope a couple weeks ago in Wynwood. Yes. You know what I'm saying? And it just took me, like, the first thing when I got on stage, it kind of took me for a moment. I had to like tell the crowd, there are a lot of motherfuckers in there who knew me since I was 10 years old. Right. And now this has become a full circle moment in my life that I'm actually on stage about to perform for the people that I used to follow around and try to tag along and be a part of. And it was just like, it was almost surreal for me.
Yeah, everybody you mentioned, they were all local heroes to us. Yeah. You know, Epps and Mother Superior and all these people. And
Mother Superior.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, I put her on the album that I released in 2015, like, and I've tried to stay in contact, and I went crazy trying to find her. Like, I always say that if she was one of the first people to get a major record deal out of down south, like of our era of doing stuff. And had she come out, she got shelved by the label. But she had an album that had production by Redman, and it had KRS One on there, LES, like all this different stuff, and she was repping Miami hard, but lyrically they used to call it the female Nas is what the media was like, the publications were calling her. And her first video got directed by the GZA when this is when Wu-Tang was just really popping, and her album got shelved. And she had moved to New York or something, and it just didn't work out. And I always say that had her album had come out, I think we would have had a different musical landscape in terms of hip hop, you know, for what Miami would have been. Because imagine, you know, what that mark she would have made coming out at that time.
Like another Latifah, but from the South.
From the South.
Yeah. Because with the exception of Trina, I don't really know a lot of other impactful female MCs that came out, at least back then. Yeah. You know? Damn, that's crazy. Like, so I'm watching Hip Hop Evolution on Netflix, right? And there's a part where they talk about Miami. Right. And of course, you know, Uncle Luke is on there, and, you know, and I've DJ for Luke on the road. Disco Rick is on there. Freestyle Steve, you know, my dude Steve. But
rest in peace, Uncle Al.
Rest in peace, Uncle Al, yeah. But there was no representation of that boom bap sound that you're talking about. And I think that gets almost ignored in a sense, or almost they try to say that that's not traditional to the Miami sound, or, you know, they try to copy in New York, but like, I don't understand why that has to be that way.
Yeah, that's why sometimes I don't like watching some of these things, because it's very one-dimensional. And if you look at a lot of people that approach Miami and try to talk about Miami, it usually is one-dimensional. They're either going to be like Cubans, Haitians, the beach, you know, like it's like they never really see Miami for really all the diversity of what it is and has to offer. And I wrote an article for MTV.com when the MTV Awards came down here. I don't know, it was 2003 or 4, something like that. And they had people from Miami writing articles for MTV.com. They had Luke write one, and it was like every day they were releasing something for like a week. And they had reached out to me, shout out to my boy Ramon Dukes, and they said, you know, write something. And I said, well, I want to write something like I told them, I want to write something paying homage to the scene that I'm from. Right. And they were like, what? Write whatever the fuck you want. Right. And I wrote this article called Miami's Lost Hip Hop Scene. And I just document, and like as much through my eyes, all these things that we're talking about right now, like this whole scene that had b-boys and world-renowned b-boys and DJs like Craze, you know, world-renowned DJs and graph writers and ill lyrical MCs and producers, and I just talk about this whole scene that I'm from. Yeah. And it's the Miami's Lost Hip Hop Scene, because then what happens is that, so Trick comes out And I always tell people, Trick to me is ill. He's lyrical.
Hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But Trick comes out of the bass scene. First song is Scarred.
Right.
That's where he's introduced.
Right.
So he has no ties to what we're talking about right now, really.
But it's funny, but well, not to cut you off, but you say that, and it's like after Scarred, to me, every song he did after that, all the projects he did after that was like the complete opposite. It wasn't bass music.
Of course, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, because he, if you talk to him, we've had him on Drink Champs a couple times. Like his inspirations and the artists he was into are a lot of them are lyrical artists.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a Scarface or a Biggie or whatever. So yeah, his pen game is crazy, and he's talking about. That's why like you could probably talk to a lot of like diehard hip hop heads from Miami. If they're true diehard Miami hip hop heads, not someone that like a transplant that's still stuck in another city. They're true Miami. They're never gonna deny. The Trick is a part of that catalog of music that you listen to, because to me, the illest lyrics and the illest music is the stuff that you could relate to. And when Trick was talking, and you're from Miami, you could relate to everything he's saying. So, but he comes from the bass scene though. I would say that artists like a Pitbull or Ross even, they're kind of a direct product though of our scene, whether they know it or not. You know, the more of the boom bap side.
Right.
It's because Ross he didn't come from the bass scene. And although Pitt got signed to Luke, he told me a story that he came to Crazy Goods when he was 14.
Oh shit.
Asking me about like pun and asking for advice and stuff. And he used to have cornrows and he used to rap like Dragon. You know, there's like old footage of him, you know. So our scene made an impact, but for whatever reason, people they just kind of like, you know, looked past it and it didn't exist, you know. For example, Wynwood today, people don't even know this, but Wynwood wouldn't be Wynwood without the scene that I'm talking about, because Wynwood was a place, an area, the graffiti writers call it a pennant. Okay. It's where they could go and freely do murals, because it was such a bad area in that time that the cops didn't care what you did in those, you know, broken down warehouses and those areas. So they would all go do murals, and they would battle each other, and all the graffiti writers around the city would go there. And that's what started this like art movement there. And then on top of that, you had Wynwood. It was like the one little Puerto Rican pocket. And Zulu was kind of like based out of the Zulu Nation.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so we used to go to jams in Wynwood like in the early 90s. And Zulu would have like, we would be in Roberto Clemente Park, which is right there in the heart of Wynwood, and they would have like the Zulu like security, and they would be literally like crackheads running around. And they would basically like keep the crackheads at bay, and the B-boys would be dancing, the DJ, and you had DJ Raw, who's infamous in Miami, and he had a mobile radio station and a school bus that was like pirated. He would run around with it so he wouldn't get caught. Right. And we would go to these, that was like the only place to go to hip hop jams was like there at that time. And it was in the heart of Wynwood. And then fast forward now and look at what Wynwood is today. And we used to do block parties there, all kinds of stuff we were doing in Wynwood. It was like a place we could just do shit at. And now it's this art district where even like, you know, you couldn't even afford to live there probably.
Right, and now it's all about the Wynwood walls and all the. And it's crazy, like my man Thurston Howe III, you know, his grandmother's house his house gone. It was on 26th Street, same street as Wood Tavern where I spent at on Sundays. And I would park right by her house and then walk 2 blocks over to Wood, but now that house is gone. Right. And now there's like a sign up there that they're gonna put like a condominium or a mini condo or studio apartments there or some shit.
But I guess my point is that this is me again, my opinion. Wynwood we have today wouldn't even be there had it not been from the hip hop culture that I'm talking about. And I mean, I don't know if we want to just call it boom bap, because that might not be fair either to just say boom bap. You know, people like they just isolate. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but just the culture that I come from of hip hop, which is the total culture. You know, the B-boys, the graphic artists, the MCs, all of that stuff. You had Zulu Nation, you had this, that. That, to me, Wynwood today wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that scene, because that's what kind of drove people there to start with, and put all that graffiti there. People say, oh shit, maybe, you know, we could do something here.
Let me ask you a question, because, you know, when like I've been DJing about 11 years, right? And I was a rapper first. And when I first started, you know, people would say certain shit like, oh, now you trying to DJ now, and, you know, what makes you think you can do that? Why are you doing that? And for me, it was always like, yo, I'm a child of hip hop culture, you know, so why does it matter if I'm now taking on another aspect of the culture, another branch of this tree? Because would you have the same, you know, issues if I went from rapping to graffiti, if I was a breakdancer that started DJing, if I was graffiti and breakdancing, like, but for some reason, there's always this black cloud of when an artist now takes on the craft of spinning. And it's the reason why when I started, I said, I'm going to make sure I'm going to do it on turntables and try to, keep as close to the original art form as possible and not, get so bent on CDJs and controllers or whatever. But now it's like nowadays it doesn't really matter what you use in a sense. Right. You can use anything. But I just wanted to know like your view or perspective on that, like as far as artists that then become DJs or, like a Q-Tip, like a D-Nice, that start out as rappers and then now they're DJing. Is that like...
I mean, I don't have any problem with it. I think as long as you do it with pure intentions, and it's authentic. I'm just not a fan of anybody that does anything because they're following a trend or they're just like, oh, okay, this didn't work for me, so let me go to the total opposite other thing just because maybe that'll work for me. But they not really wholeheartedly into that. Right. Like I could tell when you spin, you into it. Yeah. So that's my thing. I think you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want to do if it's authentic to who you are and you're really doing it wholeheartedly.
Right. When you started, you used to manage a group, Mayday?
I mean, it was a little bit later down the line, but yeah, I've known Mayday for years. Actually, Bernie from Mayday and Plex, and shout out to my boy Tori. They had a group called All the King's Men. They went to Killian around the same time as Last Straws and all that. Oh yeah? Yeah, and then Tori, I went to Arvida with Tori.
I went to Arvida. You went to Arvida?
Yeah, I went to Arvida. Yeah.
Vikings, baby.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
So that's how I kind of connected. And the first thing that we did as Crazy Hood is we did a warehouse party. Actually, down the block from here. My boy's dad had a car body shop, and on the weekend when they left the shop, we cleaned up the shop. The dad didn't even know nothing about it. Brought in turntables, and we did a party in there, and All the King's Men. Again, it was my first thing doing as Crazy Hood, and I had to rep for the local scene, so I made sure that I put on a local group to perform, and had local DJs. I mean, obviously, that's who I was gonna have, but All the King's Men performed. And fast forward years later, All the King's Men, Tori left the group. I don't know where Tori ended up at, but Plex and Burns started a group called Mayday. And we reconnected, and they were doing their thing. And then Recognize was a solo artist in the battle scene. He won that MTV battle. Right. He was supposed to sign to Rockefeller. That didn't happen, but he won the battle nonetheless. And he made, he had a little buzz going on. So all these two guys, the reason I said they got signed to a local label called South Beat Records that was run by the big porn company Reality Kings. Okay. And they also managed Kimbo Slice at the time. Oh shit. They brought me in to be the VP of marketing for this, and it was based out on South Beach on 7th and Washington. And I remember, I'll never forget, I was like, all right, well, the artists you got here aren't really doing nothing. They just didn't have a name out there yet. Right. So I had Kimbo host a mixtape called it Bare Knuckle Hits. And I wrapped all the vehicles, and it was like Kimbo like this. Hilarious kid, never hosted a mixtape. It was like pulling teeth to get him to talk on the mic to do the hosting. And then Mayday's on there, Recognize, and then fast forward, Recognize joins Mayday. I leave the label, and then I ended up managing them like about a year after that. Yeah.
So you have All the King's Men, and then...
And I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you. No, but this is the way I think. I'm scatterbrained.
It's dope because I'm scatterbrained too, because I'm going to tie it all together now. You got All the King's Men, and then you got Mayday, but then where in that timeline is the Alliance and Garcia?
Right after that first... So when I started Crazy Hood, I didn't DJ. I didn't have money. No, I didn't have money for turntable. I wanted to DJ. I was making pause tapes with two tape decks. Shit. So I didn't have the money to DJ, but I knew I wanted to do something. Right. This was '93, graduating out of high school. I told my boys, I said, "Yo, I want to do something. Let's put a company together, Crazy Hood Productions." A couple people laughed at me, like, "Come on, man, we don't know nobody in the business. Like, what the fuck are we gonna do out of Kendall?" Other people were like, "Out of Kendall?" like I'm like, "Yeah, what the fuck?" Why not? And the first thing I did was that party. Right after that party, the party got shot up, which the cops were like, we wrote CHP on the fly. They're like, if we ever see the CHP, we shutting it down. Right. Luckily, the person didn't die. They ended up in the hospital. Whatever, everything was fine. The dad found out we did the body shot shit because of the shootout. That was a mess. And then I got into the studio, and what we would do back then is we would all sign up. I told all my friends, it was like 10, 15 of us at the time. Everybody sign up at Miami-Dade and sign up for engineering classes, because that's how we're going to record a project. Wow. And so I started, I just wanted to learn the process of producing a group and developing a group. So I started managing a group called Poetic Symbols, which my boy Big Drain was a part of it.
Big Drain.
Yeah. He could sing, he could rhyme, he could produce, all of that. Him and his two other homeboys, we put a group together called Poetic Symbols, went through the process, went to How Can I Be Down, shopped the demo, got picked up. I thought we were going to get signed, thought we made it. Def Jam sends me a letter, well, great effort, but we're not going to sign it.
Shit.
And then after that, I started producing The Alliance after that project. And then so The Alliance, Poetic Symbol Alliance, and then later on, working with Mayday.
Mayday. How vital was How Can I Be Down to like the Miami hip hop scene?
It was everything, because for someone like me who had no kind of connections to the industry and nothing, you know, having that conference in our backyard gave me access to people.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is this: when How Can I Be Down comes, I'm starting to DJ. I got my turntables now. I'm starting to make mixtapes. Now there, I have access to get drops and freestyles from artists. So I'm rolling around with a tape. All of us are rolling around with portable tape decks, getting drops. And at that time, for a local to have these drops from Method Man and Puff and Big and this and that, just a drop was huge. You know, it made waves for you locally, and that's what started to get my name buzzing. With the mixtape scene, you know, and that's what really started to pave the way for everything we were doing was the mixtapes.
Right. A funny story at How Can I Be Down 96.
Yeah.
I walked into me and Simeon actually walked into the Hotel Intercontinental, and I tried to battle Rock from Helter Skelter.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I can see that.
I just walked into him like, "What's up? Spit something," and then Simeon is like trying to move me out the way and shit. But yeah, that's my one, two memories of How Can I Be Down. That was one, and then the other one was Busta Rhymes and the Flipmo Squad parked outside of the Shore Club Hotel. That day parked and had
I have a vivid memory of him standing there and like a crowd forming around.
Yeah. I was right there. I was one of them little kids, man, standing right there. And all of that came through, from Selwyn being at the source and saying, look, this shit's coming to Miami. I'll be down there. You say you want to rap. You need to come be around this. I'm 16 years old, not knowing nothing from nothing. All I know is like, I love this culture and I'm trying to do this shit. And my brothers, one from a journalistic standpoint, one from an artist and producer standpoint, are both ingrained in this shit. And here I come trying to be involved in it in some capacity. I don't know how, but.
Was that intimidating for you to have your brothers be so involved?
It wasn't intimidating, but it wasn't as helpful as people might have thought it was, because you got to remember, like, Selwyn was there the night Biggie got killed.
Yeah.
So me.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was there, like, in his book, Gunshots in My Cookup, one of the chapters he talks about it. But, for me telling him I want to rap and him just going through the death of Tupac, then the death of Biggie, and I'm telling him I want to do this. His whole thing was about trying to protect his little brother from getting into this culture that's so fucked up.
Right.
And meanwhile, I'm sitting there like, help me. This person, that person, get me a record deal. But I didn't understand like the politics of the business and how shit works and all of that. So it was kind of, I was very young and immature in mindset but just like, no, my brothers are the shit. This should be easy for me. Right. And it was the exact opposite.
It seemed like you had to just pave your own way.
Yeah.
Which is, is going to make you better in the long run.
Right. And, and that's what I've been attempting to do and trying to do. But always remembering to include them in some type of homage, for everything I do. Absolutely. For the people like Epps who fuck with me today are because Epps used to DJ, was in the group with Simeon. They were called School Days. Yeah. And it was back when Epps was called Ep Rock. Yep. You know what I mean? It was like him, Beto, Epps, Tyson, Kamani, two dancers, because every rapper had to have a dancer back then. And a lot of my relationships from the older generation come from the relationships that they have with my brothers. So it goes hand in hand now. But fast forwarding a little bit, because I want to get to obviously to Drink Champs and what you guys have going on now. I was watching an interview you did with Entrepreneur. Yeah, that's how you say it. Yeah, and you were kind of breaking down the multi-platform deal that you have. Right. But I didn't really get to finish watching it. But like, explain that to me, because it's three platforms all working together.
It's Tidal, Mass Appeal, And Mass Appeal in itself is like a multi-partnership with this company called Endeavor, and then it's Revolt. So Tidal, what it allows, they're subscription based. So we made a deal with them where they license, and it's just to their subscribers.
Okay.
And they get they premiere it to their subscriber base.
So Tidal gets it first.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, it gets really complicated, and this has never really been done, I don't think, in podcasting. And we're all like still figuring it out because it's so complicated. Because it's gonna flip. Because when we do seasons with Revolt, so when Revolt season starts up, then it flips who premieres it. But whatever, let's not go there. So it premieres on Tidal, and they get it for like a window. And so that, being that it's subscriber based, it allowed us to do other deals. So we made an audio podcast deal with Mass Appeal, which is Nas's company.
Okay.
And they sell advertising on our audio podcast.
Okay.
And then Revolt, who was already a partner, they do linear, which is TV, and they also distribute the YouTube video publicly.
Okay.
So these two entities, Mass Appeal and Revolt, are the public entities, and these guys have a deal with us for their subscriber base, and that's what allows the three partnerships.
So Tidal
to work.
Tidal is linear, is visual because it's video.
It's video, but it's that's what made it a little complicated because it took months to negotiate this. So that video component on Tidal is what kind of complicated things.
Okay.
But yeah, they're video and audio. They get both.
They get both separately.
They get both at the same time. I'm saying,
But you could just listen to the audio.
yeah, I don't know why they would need audio too, because you could just listen to the video. But you know, if you just, I don't know. If you want to listen to the player, they have the audio by itself, and then they have the video.
Okay.
So they get that first, and then the audio comes out through Mass Appeal.
And then where do you go to listen to the audio?
It's wherever you listen to podcasts. So they just distribute it.
Okay.
But they sell ads on it. That's really what they are. They're our ad sales team basically.
Okay.
And we have a deal with them based on what we think we're gonna make on advertising. And then Revolt releases the YouTube, and they put it on the network.
Television.
Yeah, television.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's like on some like RZA, Wu-Tang, and then every artist gets a solo deal type shit.
It's crazy, man. And we're still we're maybe 4 or 5 weeks into it right now, and it's still like everybody's still trying to figure out, because it's the first time it's kind of been done this way. No one's really ever done this.
Right.
So there's no blueprint on how does this all work.
Right.
You know, and we're trying to figure out the best way to market everybody so everybody gets their fair share of marketing from our end, and get all the tools and the clips and the images. So we're figuring it all out. I mean, it's working so far.
Right. I guess because most people think a podcast is really just plug in, turn the mic on, and record, and then put it out. But it's
Which it could be.
It could be. Oh, but at a high level, it's way more intricate than that.
Right. Well, yeah. Once you start to really, once you have an audience, a big audience, then everybody wants to monetize you and take a piece of it, and you want to monetize it and make sure you get, maximum you could get out of it. And so that's where all these different deals came into play.
Is it as I use the word unfair as the record deal structure?
No, because this is totally different. We own our content.
Oh.
Which is different. Now, again, it's complicated because, so with Revolt, we have a specific deal for content they produce, which creates seasons. So everything off season is where we had to create this new partnership with the three, because then we were like, okay, to be fair, we're gonna give you this we're gonna work with you and partner with this other content that's not a part of the seasons.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Because it damn near almost doesn't make sense to all of us. But yeah, it's complicated and intricate, and I mean, we're working through it, and I think at the end of it, we've created a new model for everybody to kind of follow,
Right.
which I think is kind of dope.
I was gonna say it's more like you guys are like kind of pioneering a different or the next level of podcasting, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're a part of the people pioneering stuff.
Did you envision that when you first started it? Like, how did it even begin?
So here, not too far from here, I had my other office, the warehouse. And Nori, he had moved down here years back. He actually lived in Kendall for a while.
No, you lived in Kendall?
Yeah, to be close to my studio. He was working right out of my studio. And our homie, Nori's homie, and he introduced him to me, Leo G from at that point it was just XM. They weren't Sirius XM yet. 66 Raw was the channel. Leo G was saying, hey, you guys want to do a show? I'll distribute it on XM for you guys. And we were like, yeah, that sounds cool. So we started to produce a show out of our office here, out of our studio. It was a weekly Thursday show or bi-weekly, something like that. Just doing it, no money involved. Just thought it was kind of cool to do it. And then it became, we did it for like 3 years. Then Sirius XM, the merger happened. We were on 66 Raw, we were on Backspin, we were on Hip Hop Nation, a couple different stations on there, and then
doing the same show on different stations.
No, it was like what happens is like it just moved around. Okay. So like we were on XM before the merger, then the merger happened, then we were on Hip Hop Nation, and then they moved us to Backspin, and then we were on Sirius XM, and then we stopped doing that because we weren't making any money out of it. Nori went on tour. I started managing Mayday at the time. Okay. Mayday got signed to Strange Music. We were doing big tours and stuff.
That's Tech Nine.
Yeah. We signed. Yeah, they did a song with Tech and Kendrick Lamar. We got that gold plaque right there, Fragile. So we were both busy, so we weren't making bread off of it, so we stopped doing it. But if you go back and you listen to, and we actually have some YouTube clips of that show. It's called Militant and Crazy Raw Radio, which Nori named it. He wanted to put every element of our different names in it. If you look at that, it looks and sounds like Drink Champs, just without a lot of guests. We were saying, make some noise, introduce the same way, drinking Tiger Bone, drinking liquor, wilding out. And so another friend of mine at the time, parallel to this, he's doing podcasting for years. He's like in the podcast Hall of Fame. He does a gaming podcast called Gamer Tag Radio out of this area, out of Kendall. And so he's always been telling me like, yo, man, you should podcast. Like that's the thing that I got off of him, like in the podcast community, that you shouldn't just keep this to yourself. Everybody should podcast. That's why I told you should podcast, Right. And so he was like, yeah, man, you should podcast. You got something to say, just podcast. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And I did want to try to do what we were doing before, but in a format that allowed flexibility, that we could do it whenever. In a podcast, you could record it, release whenever the fuck you want.
Right.
So I tried to get Nori on it. He wasn't really up on podcasting. A lot of people in hip hop at the time weren't.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, it came out of nowhere.
People felt like, I felt like hip hop heads looking at that's some nerd computer shit. Like, I don't know what the fuck that is, Took a while. Then Nori got approached by Loudspeakers Network, which is Combat Jack and those guys.
Oh, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace to Combat Jack. And they were like, yo, that whatever you and EFN were doing, why don't you do it as a podcast? So Nori throws them my way. We discuss it. They send equipment and everything. Nori's still not ready. It takes like 5 years for this to eventually get off the ground. Nori does Tax Stone's show.
Okay.
And Nori comes back from that like, oh man,
I like this podcast shit.
He saw himself in Tax as like a podcast, like, oh, like a street dude. Mm-hmm. He's like, all right, I'm ready, And then at the time, my boy Godfrey, who had Gamertag, he had did a distribution deal with CBS Radio. And Nori, we just like the sound of CBS. It just sounded big. So we recorded some demos, Fat Joe, Kenny Anderson. They loved it.
Which I listened to that.
Signed to them, and the rest is history. And we didn't know that it was going to pop the way it did. And there's a lot of, and again, I'm scatterbrained, so I don't want to take you through this whole craziness, but Drink Champs, the name, has its own story because it wasn't always attached to it. I had held it from back in the days because I just thought it was a dope name that we used to say, like a slogan we would say at the office. If you got fucked up, you couldn't handle your liquor, you're not a drink champ. So I just grabbed all those social handles, the website, and created a logo eventually, not knowing exactly what it would be. And then when we were ready to rock, I told Nori, let's just call it, I got all this ready, let's call it Drink Champs. He's like, fuck it, let's go, let's do it,
You had foresight.
I mean, I like to think so.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But when you were doing it on Sirius XM, was it guest based?
No, that's what I'm saying. It was the same thing, just without
the guests.
Yes, because we're here in Kendall. How many fucking people are gonna come to Kendall?
Right.
It's like you
we had Fat Joe, I think, a couple people.
Right, but then you were doing this. You said for like 3 years.
Yeah.
So like, what did you find to talk about, or what did you talk about?
We were just clowning, talking shit, talking about whatever the topics at the time was in hip hop, and really it was just an excuse to drink and act stupid, which is what Drink Champ still is. It was fuckery, man. Like,
do you think that the visual component of podcasts is a benefit? It helps the overall industry?
Yeah, I think it does, but what I really love about the audio podcast is that I think a lot of people just don't, like, they underestimate it. The power of it is that you just have to, you could, I don't know, it's just, there's something in just listening to something and visualizing it. And that's why there's always going to be an audio podcast, like listenership. out there. There's people that tell me all the time, I know you guys are on YouTube. I know you're on Revolt, but I just listen to it. I like to listen to it on my commute to work, and I just like to envision all the craziness that you guys are saying and doing, you know, and you know, sometimes we'll go and look and see if what I envision is what it is, you know. But there's something there in just doing an audio podcast I think is special. But, you know, I think to grow and to get to certain places, I think the visual component is important.
It's become necessary.
Yeah, and I think although we started just as an audio podcast, I think we had visual from the beginning. We just weren't putting out the full episode visually. We were just like putting out clips. Okay. And I'll tell you from those first couple clips, that buzz, that helped solidify the buzz for Drink Champs. Because I went to South by Southwest before we released the first episode, but we had released some video clips. And people it was already buzzing out there, like, yo, oh shit, yeah, man, Drink Champ shit, oh man, I can't wait.
And you had it was clips of guests that you had.
It was a clip of the Fat Joe episode, and just visually, it just, I don't know, man, I don't know if we did something different. I don't think we did, but it just caught on, you know. And in that first episode, it was like a hit. And it had like 300,000 listens in the first week.
Damn.
And I was just trying to get us 60,000 in a couple weeks, because that was what people were telling me we needed. What the fuck?
So is it like, to you, is it like when you first started, right? Because you said 60,000 listens, you were just trying to get 60,000?
Yeah, I asked somebody at, I think at CBS, I said, yo, so, because I just wanted to make a couple like extra bucks doing podcasting. It wasn't going to be our main thing.
Right.
So I'm like, so how many listens do we need to just bring in a little revenue? And I'm thinking, okay, so me and Nori could break bread and it's a little something extra in our pockets every month. And they were like, well, if you get like around 60,000 listens in a couple weeks, you're looking at bringing in a couple $1,000s a month.
What generates the
advertising?
Advertising.
Yeah, they'll sell advertising on those numbers.
So somebody comes to you and says, hey, I know you guys have this kind of reach. Put a commercial for my product, my service on your podcast because I know 60,000 people are going to hear it. And I'll pay you X amount?
Yeah, I mean, well, they probably articulated better the ad agency, which was CBS Radio. So at that time, it's the CBS ad sales team that does CBS TV and radio. And they basically were pitching, and they would pitch like all the shows, or they would bundle us. It'd be different ways that they would get the money.
Right.
But it took us 6 months before we made one dime. And we were the #1 podcast, I think, over there at the time. And it's because they were caught off guard, and it seemed that they didn't know how to sell us. And not every advertiser wanted to be with a bunch of drunk guys, you know, talking all this crazy shit.
Right.
You know, how does her butthole smell and you know, shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. How many abortions have you had? Like, nobody wants to advertise on that shit. So yeah, it took 6 months, but you know, we were investing in ourselves, and you know, I think that's a message to get out there. Like, we believed in it. Obviously, we had the numbers, so it was easier to believe in it at that time. And we just kept investing in ourselves, and then eventually it picked up and the advertising money started coming in.
Now it's almost like it's not even a hard sell anymore. Like it sells itself.
It could be a hard sell still, but I think what's different now from then and with the deals that we're doing now is it's more about a content, like licensing content versus necessarily just selling advertising on it. Like we can monetize the content just on the fact that it'll bring eyes to whatever platform we're working with. Like our brand is basically what it is, you know, more than just selling ads on a specific episode or shows. It's more like, what is Drink Champs, the brand, bringing in terms of eyeballs to our platform? How will it benefit us? And that's what we're leveraging and monetizing now.
What do you see? What's like the bigger picture for you? Have you had, because you obviously have had foresight from the warehouse party to, you know, do you have like a vision of what Drink Champs will be like in 5 years?
I mean, I'm sure that if you ask Nori versus me, we have two different visions. Yeah, and that's what makes Drink Champs special. We're two different people. Yeah. My vision ideally would be that we prop up our network, which we've been talking about for a long time, and we take everything we've learned and apply it to helping other people put out successful content.
So you're not one of those people that feels like, oh, the podcast world is oversaturated. Why are you doing it? Why, like, it's too much, whatever. Like, what's your take on that? Because
I mean, I don't have time to be worried about that. I feel like everything's oversaturated nowadays. And what's happening now in podcasting, which didn't happen, luckily, when we came in, is that now every celebrity or everybody that has some kind of a name out there is starting a podcast. they're leveraging any kind of like, if they have social media following or they're just an actor, a musician, whatever, they're like, oh, if I got people looking at me, I'm gonna do a podcast, which why shouldn't they? And they can monetize that. Right. So that what happens is then the Joe Schmo coming in the game, he's fucked. He's really got to dig and work hard to get his followers and listeners when you got like somebody that's already known out there. So it is getting oversaturated, but I feel like you just can't worry about it. If, again, you just be authentic, follow your passion, have a plan. What I tell new podcasters all the time is like, look, have a plan, have your goals, understand what you're doing with your podcast, what your voice, what you're trying to do with your voice, and then have a 6 month to a year plan. Be consistent with it, and then evaluate it at that point. Right. Am I growing? You know, maybe you're not going to be having hundreds of thousands of or even millions of listens, but is it growing at a point where you're comfortable with for you to keep doing it? You know,
right? You know, it's like I see like, you know, for the Fly Guy show, I brand it as part podcast, part friendly conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, because I said, you know, when I began it, I just wanted to be able to sit and talk with people that I know, that I've known for however many years, and just kind of just build, as we like to say, and just, you know, shoot the shit. And then however it evolves and becomes whatever it's going to be, you know, that's what it is. Right. You know, and, you know, I kind of mentioned to a couple of people that what I plan to do, and instantly they were like, it's oversaturated. Why are you going to do it? Nah, you shouldn't do that. So what, you want to rap, you want to DJ, now you want to do a podcast? And it was like, I shouldn't have said shit to them. Right. And should have just did it. You know, because it's like, to me, it's all about constantly reinventing yourself and expanding your brand and evolving, you know, as a person and as a brand. And I think I've put in enough years and energy into this culture in Miami that I have the right to do some shit like this.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And, you know, sometimes I can say that I second guess myself and
human.
Yeah, you know, and let, you know, I let people's, you know, opinions kind of not sway my decision making, but it is something that I would think about. It would be like on my mind. Like, did you ever have to face anything like that? Like people say like, EFN, what the fuck why?
From day one, like I said, right from day one of starting Crazy Hood, they were like, why? You don't know nobody, you don't got no skill, you don't, nothing. Like, you don't know, you're from Kendall. They're like, this is the wackest place. And I'm like, fuck you, this is my home. Right. It ain't whack to me, right. You know? And if anything, what hip hop was teaching me is be authentic to where you're from, where you're at, represent all of that. So I was sticking die hard to what I was learning in the culture, and I was trying to help our local culture, and no one was gonna sway me from that. But of course, what I've told a lot of artists too, like your biggest naysayers are usually the people's closest to you,
right? And
people that care about you. So they genuinely are not just being negative. They don't want to see you hurt or fail, and that's it. They honestly care. But you gotta have, if you have a vision and you have a passion, I just feel like you just gotta put on those, you know, those horse blinders, and just go for it. Because now what happens is, all these people throughout the years and everything that I've ever done have always been like, nah, that ain't gonna work, nah. And not everything worked. Right. But, you know, you keep trucking, and they've all come around full circle. Like, oh, fuck. Yeah. You know, imagine if I would have been that idiot that listened to every single person and said, nah, come on, man. You know, like, I've heard it all, man. Like, you know, Kendall, Miami, Latino, this, that, the other. I don't give a fuck, bro. You know,
that's like people talking about Kendall, this part of town is not really Miami. It's not a part of Miami. Yeah.
Great story. But some of the biggest things in hip hop that had come out of Miami have come out of Kendall. Yeah. You know, like movements, in terms of movements, you know, I mean, I just think, I always revert to Craze alone. Like I tell people, you don't know who Craze is, but Craze is one of the biggest fucking DJs in the world. Right out of Kendall, right. You know, right. Things like that, man. You know, Kendall's been great for the city in terms of what we've done contribution-wise to the hip-hop scene out here.
EFN, I thank you, family. I appreciate you. This is eye-opening, man. This is even, you know, for me just getting into this, you give me a lot of jewels, man, and things that I will definitely apply, you know, as I continue to push forward. But
and, you know, off camera, you always hit me up, any questions you have about anything.
No doubt. Appreciate it, man.